The bridge loan. The morning sun found James Mackenzie in Dr. Harrison's parlor, studying the charred remnants of hope. Brennan's assay documentation lay spread across the mahogany table. 3 copies, miraculously intact despite the bank fire. The papers bore scorch marks along their edges, and the ink had run in places where water from the bucket brigade had splashed across them, but the critical numbers remained legible. 847 ounces per ton. Net value $480 after refining costs. James traced a finger along the watermark, staining the corner of one document. They'd come so close to losing everything in that fire. If Brennan hadn't kept one copy in his coat pocket, if the vault's brick and steel construction hadn't protected the ore samples, if the consortium's timing had been just slightly better. Stop torturing yourself with what-ifs. Eleanor appeared in the doorway, carrying a tray with coffee and biscuits. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Neither of them had slept more than an hour after watching the bank burn. We have the documentation. The ore survived. Now we move forward. James accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping his hands around the warm cup. Through the window, Medicine Hat was waking to a November morning that promised the first real cold of the season. Smoke still rose from the bank's ruins, a black smudge against the pale sky. 6 days, he said quietly. If the consortium delays us even one more day, then we'll find another way. Eleanor sat beside him, her hand finding his. We always do. Footsteps on the stairs announced Sarah's arrival, fully dressed despite the early hour, her rifle propped against her shoulder with the casual familiarity of a soldier. She'd been keeping watch from the upstairs window since dawn broke. 3 men watching the house, she reported, settling into the chair across from them. Different faces than yesterday, but same pattern. One at the hotel, one near the livery, one pretending to read a newspaper outside Cooper's shop. James felt the familiar weight settle onto his shoulders, the constant calculation of threats and responses that had become second nature over these brutal months. They're making sure we see them. Psychological pressure. It's working. Eleanor's voice was tight. Every time I look out that window, I imagine them deciding which of us to shoot first. Dr. Harrison entered carrying his medical bag, already dressed for morning rounds. The consortium wants you frightened, he said, setting the bag by the door. Frightened people make desperate decisions, but you're not desperate. You're strategic. There's a difference. Are your investors still willing to meet? James asked. Harrison nodded. This afternoon at 3 o'clock. My surgery, not my home, more discreet. They're cautious men, but they're also tired of watching Toronto money squeeze honest homesteaders. If Brennan's assessment convinces them... If. Sarah's laugh was bitter. Everything hangs on if. The sound of boots on the front porch silenced them. James's hand dropped to the revolver at his hip as Harrison moved to answer the knock. But the voice that called through the door was familiar. It's Daniel. I've got Brennan with me. Relief flooded through James as Harrison opened the door. Daniel Thornton entered first, his young face grim, supporting Josiah Brennan, who moved stiffly, his left arm bound in a fresh sling. Christ! Eleanor was on her feet immediately. What happened? Brennan waved away her concern with his good hand. Consortium sent 2 men to my hotel room last night. Suggested I might want to revise my assessment of your ore. Call it lower grade, maybe question whether it came from your claim at all. He settled carefully into a chair. When I declined their generous offer of $500 to commit perjury, they decided to be more persuasive. James felt cold fury settle in his gut. How badly are you hurt? Dislocated shoulder, some bruising. Brennan's weathered face showed more anger than pain. Dr. Harrison patched me up well enough, but they made their point clear. Testify against you, or accidents might keep happening. Harrison was already examining the sling with professional concern. I should check those stitches again. The wound might have reopened when... The wound's fine. Brennan's voice was steel. What's not fine is hired thugs thinking they can intimidate a man who's spent 30 years testing ore for miners who'd shoot you for lying. I've faced down claim jumpers, crooked speculators, and men who thought a bullet was cheaper than an honest assay. These Toronto bastards don't scare me. Sarah leaned forward. Will you still testify? Give a sworn statement before the magistrate? Already did. Brennan reached into his coat pocket with his good hand, producing a sealed envelope. Went straight to the courthouse after Harrison set my shoulder. Magistrate Pemberton took my statement under oath, had it witnessed and notarized. The consortium can threaten all they want. My assessment is now part of the official record. James took the envelope with hands that wanted to shake. Inside was a single sheet of heavy paper bearing the territorial seal and Magistrate Pemberton's signature. The sworn statement laid out Brennan's credentials, his examination of the ore, his testing methodology, and his final assessment. At the bottom, in Brennan's precise hand, I swear under penalty of perjury that this ore, extracted from the Mackenzie claim and stored in the Medicine Hat Bank vault, contains 847 ounces of silver per ton with an estimated net value of $480 per ton after standard refining costs. This is everything, James said quietly. With this, we can approach the investors. There's more. Brennan shifted in his chair, grimacing slightly. The men who visited me last night were sloppy, angry. One of them let slip that they'd been ordered to delay any assessment by at least a week. Keep you from securing financing until after your deadline passes. Eleanor's face had gone pale. They know exactly how much time we have, which means someone with access to bank records is feeding them information. Sarah said, Cornelius Webb. Daniel nodded. Has to be. He's the only one who'd know your exact deadline. James studied the sworn statement, his mind working through implications. The consortium wasn't just watching. They had someone inside the bank itself, someone who could track every transaction, every deadline, every vulnerability. Webb had always seemed nervous around them, but James had attributed it to general unease about the violence surrounding their claim. Now that nervousness took on a darker meaning. If Webb is compromised, Eleanor said slowly, then storing the ore in his vault was still the right choice, Harrison interrupted. Webb might be feeding information to the consortium, but he won't risk his professional reputation by letting anything happen to property stored in his vault. Too many witnesses, too much documentation. The ore is safer there than anywhere else. Thomas appeared in the doorway. Rubbing sleep from his eyes, his arithmetic book clutched under one arm. Papa, why is everyone awake so early? Eleanor rose immediately, moving to intercept him. Just some business talk, love. Why don't you help Mrs. Brennan with breakfast? I smell bacon cooking. But Thomas had already seen Brennan's sling, and his young face clouded with recognition. Did the bad men hurt him too? The question hung in the air like smoke. James watched his 11-year-old son. This boy who'd witnessed his father nearly die twice, who'd learned to recognize danger in the set of a stranger's shoulders, who carried his own trauma with the silent dignity of a much older child. What had they done to their children by fighting this fight? Yes, James said finally, because Thomas deserved truth. The bad men hurt Mr. Brennan because he told the truth about our mine, but he's going to be fine, and his truth is going to help us save our home. Thomas considered this with the seriousness of a child who'd grown up too fast. Will the bad men try to hurt us again? Probably. Sarah's voice was gentle but honest. But we're ready for them, and we're not fighting alone. Thomas nodded slowly, then surprised them all by walking directly to Brennan and extending his small hand. Thank you for telling the truth, sir. My papa says that's the most important thing. Brennan shook the boy's hand solemnly with his good one. Your papa's right, son, and you've got a brave family here. They've been through hell, but they're still standing. After Eleanor had guided Thomas toward the kitchen, Daniel spoke quietly. The consortium's getting desperate. First the bank fire, now assaulting Brennan in his hotel. They're taking bigger risks, making more noise, which means they're running out of time too, Sarah said. Something's changed. They're not just trying to acquire the mine anymore. They're trying to destroy any evidence of its value. James felt pieces clicking together in his mind. The Pinkerton investigation. Thomas Garrett is riding north right now, carrying whatever evidence Blackburn gathered before they killed him. The consortium knows their window is closing. So they're trying to eliminate your ability to pay the bank before Garrett arrives, Harrison said. If you default, the bank forecloses. The consortium buys the property at auction, and by the time Garrett shows up with evidence of their crimes, they're the legal owners. Bastards. Daniel's jaw was tight. They've thought of everything. Not everything. James stood, feeling determination crystallize into something harder than fear. They didn't count on Brennan having the spine to defy them. They didn't count on you having investors willing to buck Toronto money, and they sure as hell didn't count on us being too stubborn to quit. Eleanor returned from the kitchen, closing the door behind her. Mrs. Brennan is keeping Thomas occupied with breakfast. Now tell me, what's our actual plan for today? Harrison pulled out his pocket watch. It's 7:30 now. The investors will meet us at 3 o'clock. That gives us 7.5 hours to prepare our case. We need more than Brennan's assessment, Sarah said. We need to show them we're worth the risk, that we have a plan beyond just paying off the bank. James nodded. We tell them the truth. The mine has a rich vein that runs deep. We've barely scratched the surface. With proper equipment and time, we could extract enough silver to make everyone wealthy. But first, we need to survive long enough to work it. And we need to explain the consortium's interest, Daniel added. Show them this isn't just about one claim. It's about Toronto money trying to steal proven deposits from honest homesteaders. They'll ask about security, Harrison warned. How you plan to protect the mine from theft or sabotage while you work it. We tell them about the Pinkerton investigation, Eleanor said. About Thomas Garrett riding north to expose the conspiracy. Once that evidence becomes public, the consortium will be too busy defending themselves in court to threaten anyone. Brennan cleared his throat. I can testify to more than just the ore quality. In my statement to Magistrate Pemberton, I documented the threats made against me last night. Names, descriptions, everything. That's evidence of witness intimidation. A criminal offense. James felt hope kindle in his chest, fragile but real. So we're not just asking for a loan. We're offering them a chance to invest in a legitimate mining operation while helping expose a criminal conspiracy. Frame it right, Harrison said, and it stops being a risky gamble and starts being a moral imperative. Sarah stood and moved to the window, her rifle comfortable in her hands. The watchers are still there, 3 of them, just standing around like they've got nothing better to do. Let them watch, James said. Let them report back to whoever's giving orders. Tell them the Mackenzies are meeting with investors this afternoon. Maybe it'll make them nervous, or make them desperate enough to try something, Eleanor warned. Which is why we go armed, Daniel said, and we go together. The next hours passed in careful preparation. Harrison sent word to his investors confirming the 3 o'clock meeting. Brennan rested his shoulder but remained alert, his sworn statement safely tucked in Harrison's desk. Sarah maintained watch from the upstairs window, tracking the consortium's surveillance pattern. Eleanor worked with Mrs. Brennan to keep Thomas occupied and calm, shielding him from the adult tensions that filled every room. James spent the time reviewing numbers with Daniel, calculating exactly how much they needed to borrow and what terms they could reasonably offer. The math was straightforward. $280 to pay the bank, plus additional capital for equipment, supplies, and security while they worked the mine. Call it $500 total to be safe. Can 3 local investors raise that much? Daniel asked. Harrison thinks so. James studied the figures again. Says they're men who've done well enough to have capital sitting idle. The question is whether they're brave enough to risk it. At 2:30, they prepared to leave. Harrison had suggested they arrive early, giving themselves time to settle before the investors appeared. Sarah checked her rifle one final time, while Daniel ensured his revolver was loaded and accessible. James felt the weight of his own weapon at his hip, a constant reminder of how far they'd fallen from the simple dream of homesteading they'd carried from Ontario 3 years ago. Eleanor knelt before Thomas, her hands on his thin shoulders. We'll be back before supper. Mrs. Brennan will stay with you, and you're to stay inside. Understand? Thomas nodded solemnly. Are you going to fight the bad men? We're going to talk to some good men, Eleanor said gently. Men who might help us keep our home. Will it work? The question was so simple, so direct, that Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. I don't know, love, but we're going to try. They left through the back door, moving in a tight group with Sarah and Daniel flanking the others. The November air bit through James's coat, carrying the smell of wood smoke and the distant promise of snow. Medicine Hat's main street was busy with afternoon commerce. Wagons rolling past, shopkeepers sweeping porches, the distant ring of hammer on anvil from Cooper's forge. The three consortium watchers tracked their movement with obvious interest. James met the eyes of the man outside the hotel, a lean figure in an expensive coat who made no attempt to hide his surveillance. The man smiled slightly and tipped his hat in a gesture that was pure mockery. James kept walking. Harrison's surgery occupied a small building near the center of town, its windows curtained for patient privacy. The doctor unlocked the door and ushered them inside quickly, checking the street before closing and bolting the entrance. The surgery was sparse but clean. Examination table, glass-fronted cabinets of medical supplies, Harrison's desk in one corner, and a small seating area where patients could wait. Harrison gestured them toward the chairs while he lit the oil lamps against the afternoon's gathering clouds. "They'll arrive separately," he explained. "Didn't want to attract attention by showing up together. First should be here any minute." James settled into a chair, acutely aware of how much rode on the next hour. 6 days until foreclosure. One chance to secure financing. 3 investors who had to be convinced that helping the Mackenzies was worth the risk. A knock at the door made them all tense. Harrison checked through the curtain before opening it. The man who entered was perhaps 60, with iron gray hair and the weathered hands of someone who'd worked outdoors most of his life. He wore a simple suit that had seen better days, but his eyes were sharp and assessing. "James Mackenzie," Harrison said. "This is Henry Walsh. He owns the freight company that hauls goods between Medicine Hat and Calgary." Walsh shook James's hand with a grip that spoke of years handling cargo. "Harrison tells me you've got a silver mine and a consortium trying to steal it." "That's the short version," James said. "I prefer short versions." Walsh settled into a chair. "Let's hear it." Before James could respond, another knock announced the second investor. This one was younger, perhaps 40, with the calculating eyes of a merchant. Harrison introduced him as Peter Dawson, who owned the general store and had interests in several other Medicine Hat businesses. The third investor arrived moments later. Margaret Fletcher, a widow who'd inherited her husband's lumber mill and expanded it into the most profitable operation in the territory. She was perhaps 55, dressed in practical clothing, her gray hair pulled back severely. Her handshake was as firm as Walsh's. "I appreciate you coming," James began once they were all seated. "I know this situation is complicated." "Complicated is one word for it," Fletcher interrupted. "From what Harrison tells me, you're being hunted by Toronto money. You've got 6 days to pay a bank debt, and you're asking us to loan you capital based on an ore sample that might or might not be legitimate." James felt Eleanor tense beside him, but he kept his voice steady. "That's fair. So let me give you the facts, and you can decide for yourselves." He laid out the story methodically. The discovery of the mine, the Henderson family's disappearance, Cornelius Blackwood's confession before death, the consortium's escalating violence, Henry Blackburn's murder in Calgary, and finally the successful extraction of high-grade ore. He showed them Brennan's sworn statement, explained the assault on the assayer, and detailed exactly what they needed to survive until the Pinkerton investigation exposed the conspiracy. When he finished, silence filled the surgery. Walsh spoke first. "You're asking us to bet against Toronto money, against men who've already committed murder to get what they want." "Yes," James said simply. Dawson leaned forward. "What's to stop them from just killing you and taking the mine anyway? Loan or no loan?" "Thomas Garrett," Sarah answered. "The Pinkerton detective riding north right now with evidence that will destroy them. Once that becomes public, the consortium faces criminal prosecution. They can't simply murder witnesses and walk away, not with the Pinkerton agency building a case." Fletcher studied Sarah with interest. "You're very young to be talking about murder so calmly." "I'm 19, Sarah said. "And I've killed 2 men this summer defending my family. So yes, I'm calm about it, because being frightened doesn't help anyone." The investors exchanged glances. Walsh cleared his throat. "Harrison says you've got 1,000 pounds of ore in Webb's vault. That true?" "Yes," James confirmed. "And this sworn statement says it's worth $480 per ton after refining." Walsh tapped Brennan's document. "That's, what? Close to $250 net if it all assays out?" "Closer to $240, Daniel said. But the vein runs deep. What we've extracted is just the beginning. Dawson pulled out a small notebook and began calculating. You need $280 to pay the bank, plus operating capital. Call it $500 total. You're offering what as collateral? The mine itself? The mine, the homestead claim, and all extracted ore, James said. If we default, you own everything. Assuming the consortium doesn't kill you first, Fletcher said bluntly. Then we're stuck fighting them in court over a property they claim through auction. Which is why we need to pay the bank before the deadline, Eleanor said. Once the debt is satisfied, there's no foreclosure, no auction, no legal opening for the consortium to exploit. Walsh stood and moved to the window, peering through the curtain. There's 3 men watching this building right now. I'm guessing they're not here for medical treatment. Consortium surveillance, James confirmed. They've been following us all day. Christ, Walsh let the curtain fall. You're asking us to walk into a war. We're asking you to help end one, Sarah said. The consortium has been terrorizing homesteaders for years. Blackburn documented at least 3 other families they've murdered. We're just the first ones who've survived long enough to fight back. Fletcher's expression had gone thoughtful. I knew the Henderson family. Good people. Their daughter was friends with my niece. She paused. They disappeared in the middle of the night. No one ever found out what happened to them. Blackwood killed them, James said quietly. On the consortium's orders, he confessed before he died. The room fell silent again. James could hear the clock on Harrison's desk ticking, measuring the seconds of their remaining 6 days. Dawson closed his notebook. I'm out. This is too risky, too complicated. I've got a family to think about. James felt his heart sink, but Walsh spoke before he could respond. I'm in, the freight company owner said. For $200. I've spent 40 years watching Toronto money squeeze honest men. About time someone fought back. Fletcher nodded slowly. I'm in for $200 as well. For the Henderson family, if nothing else. They deserve better than to disappear into an unmarked grave. James did the math quickly. $400. Not quite enough, but close. We only need $100 more. I'll provide it, Harrison said. I was planning to anyway. Consider it my investment in seeing justice done. Eleanor's hand found James's, squeezing tight. Sarah's face showed the first real hope James had seen in weeks. Even Daniel looked stunned by the sudden turn. But Walsh raised a cautioning hand. We have conditions. First, this money goes directly to the bank. We're not handing you cash that might disappear. Second, we want documentation that the ore in Webb's vault is securing this loan. Third, if this Pinkerton detective doesn't show up within a month, we reserve the right to call the loan immediately. Fair, James said. Fletcher added her own condition, and we want regular updates on the mine's production. If this vein is as rich as you claim, we're partners now. We should know what we're invested in. More than fair, James agreed. Dawson stood, shaking his head. You're all fools, but I hope you prove me wrong. He left without another word. The remaining investors spent the next hour working out details, with Harrison drafting the loan agreement. Terms were straightforward. $500 borrowed against the mine and homestead, to be repaid within 6 months at 8% interest. If the Mackenzies defaulted, the investors would own the property jointly. If they succeeded, everyone profited. By the time they finished, darkness had fallen outside. Walsh and Fletcher left separately, slipping out into the November night with promises to deliver their funds to Harrison's office first thing in the morning. Harrison would then take the full $500 directly to the bank, paying off the Mackenzie debt before the consortium could interfere. As the surgery emptied, James felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Genuine hope. They had the money. They had 6 days. They had a chance, but Sarah remained at the window, watching the street with her rifle ready. The watchers are still there, she said quietly, and they know we just met with someone. They'll report back to whoever's giving orders. Let them, James said. By tomorrow morning, we'll have paid the bank. There won't be anything they can do about it. Don't be naive, Eleanor said, though her voice was gentle. Men who've committed murder don't stop just because we pay a debt. They'll find another angle. Daniel moved to stand beside Sarah at the window. Then we'll be ready for it. Together. The walk back to Harrison's house felt longer in the darkness. every shadow a potential threat, every sound a possible ambush. But they reached the doctor's residence safely, finding Thomas asleep on the parlor couch with Mrs. Brennan watching over him. Brennan himself was still awake, his injured shoulder freshly bandaged. "Well, we got the money," James said simply. The assayer's weathered face broke into a rare smile. "Good. Those Toronto bastards are going to wake up tomorrow and find out they've lost." But as James lay in the borrowed bed that night, Eleanor warm against his side, he couldn't shake the feeling that the consortium's next move was already in motion. They'd paid men to burn the bank, to assault Brennan, to terrorize his family for months. Losing the homestead through foreclosure was just one strategy. What would desperate men with blood on their hands do when that strategy failed? The answer came at dawn. James woke to urgent knocking on the bedroom door, Harrison's voice tight with tension. "James, you need to see this." He dressed quickly, Eleanor right behind him. They found the household gathered in the parlor, all staring at a paper that had been slipped under the front door sometime during the night. The message was brief, written in an elegant hand. "Mr. Mackenzie, we understand you've secured financing to pay your bank debt. Congratulations. However, we must inform you that certain irregularities have been discovered in your original homestead filing. The Territorial Land Office will be conducting an immediate review of your claim's validity. Until this review is complete, all property transactions, including mining operations, are suspended. We trust you'll cooperate fully with this necessary administrative process." Office of Territorial Land Management. James read it twice, feeling cold dread settle in his stomach. Sarah's voice was flat. "They're going to challenge our homestead claim itself, try to prove we never legally owned the land. Which means even if we pay the bank," Daniel said slowly, "we might not own the property we're paying for." Eleanor sank into a chair. "They've found another way. Of course they have." James looked at the paper again, noting the official seal, the formal language, the implicit threat. The consortium had moved from financial pressure to legal warfare, attacking the very foundation of their claim to the land. Harrison's face was grim. "If they can prove any irregularity in your original filing, a missed signature, an incorrect boundary description, a failure to meet cultivation requirements, they can void your entire claim. The land reverts to Crown territory, goes up for auction, and they buy it legally." James finished. "No murder, no conspiracy, just bureaucratic procedure." Brennan studied the paper with the same careful attention he'd given the ore samples. "This is sophisticated. They're not just throwing money at the problem anymore. They're using the system itself as a weapon." Sarah moved to the window, her rifle in her hands. "So what do we do?" James looked at his daughter, this young woman who'd killed to defend her family, who'd faced down armed men with nothing but courage and determination. Then he looked at Eleanor, whose strength had carried them through impossible hardships. Then at Daniel, who'd chosen to stand with them despite the danger. Then at Harrison and Brennan, who'd risked their own safety to help strangers. And he made a decision. "We fight," he said simply. "We pay the bank debt today as planned. Then we go to the land office and demand to see exactly what irregularities they're claiming. We document everything, we get copies of every filing, and we prove our claim is legitimate." "And if it's not?" Eleanor asked quietly. "If there really is some mistake in the original paperwork?" "Then we fix it," James said, "whatever it takes. We didn't survive this summer just to lose everything to a clerical error." Harrison was already moving toward his desk. "I'll send word to Edmund Whitmore. We need a lawyer who understands territorial land law. And I'll contact Walsh and Fletcher. They should know about this development." Sarah remained at the window, watching the street. "The watchers are back. 4 of them now, not 3. They're not even pretending to be casual anymore." James joined her at the window, studying the men who'd made no secret of their surveillance. They stood in a loose semicircle around Harrison's house, their message clear. "We're watching, we're waiting, and we're not going anywhere." "Let them watch," James said. "We've got work to do." The sun climbed higher, burning through the morning clouds. Somewhere in Medicine Hat, the consortium was congratulating themselves on their clever new strategy. Somewhere to the north, Thomas Garrett was riding closer with evidence that could destroy them all. And in Harrison's parlor, the Mackenzie family prepared for the next battle in a war that seemed to have no end. 6 days until foreclosure. One administrative review that could void everything. And a family that refused to surrender, no matter how many weapons the consortium deployed against them.
Thanks for watching our stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic adventures. Thanks for watching our stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic adventures.